Welcome to Reach, your platform to connect with other executive assistants and acquire game-changing knowledge and perspective. Reach is designed to inspire your workday, guide you through pivotal moments in your career, and transform you into the executive assistant you've always wanted to be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reach. This is your host, Jessica Van. I'm the founder and CEO of Maven Recruiting Group. And today I have a fellow podcaster in the house. Hi, Violet.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, Violet is also a podcaster. She has her own podcast called Violet Ventures. Violet is none other than Violet Ostuni. She is the former executive assistant to multiple CEOs and currently is the business owner of Venture Love, which is a life and business coaching consultancy that's focused on female spiritual entrepreneurs. We're going to learn more about that. I'm excited. Violet, welcome to Reach. You started at just 15 years old, devoting much of your life to the executive assistant profession. And you've worked your way up to supporting CEOs of companies like Zoox, which of course was acquired by Amazon. So you may know them under the Amazon umbrella. She also supported the CEO of Federation Bio, C. Spence Group, GenStar Capital, and Full Harvest. She's held various demanding support positions and, as any good EA does, has made her executives' goals and objectives her number one priority. That is until very recently. So in this episode, Violet is going to be sharing her feel-good story that we hope will also inspire you to follow your dreams and passion projects. And she'll be highlighting how the executive assistant career can be a platform from which to launch your own entrepreneurial ambitions like she has. So on that note, today we're going to hear all about Violet's journey from executive assistant to business owner, life coach, podcaster, and motherhood mentor. We'll be sure to link all of her ventures in the show notes as well. So to start us off, tell us the story of how you found yourself in the executive assistant role.
Yeah, happy to share. It's been quite an adventure, a journey. I remember my first experience in an admin position was actually way back in high school. It was my junior year of high school, and I was in a law program. And I had applied to join this internship to work at a law firm, and I was thinking, oh, I'll never get it. And I actually got the position. It was one or two students out of the whole program that were able to start. So for the summers, I started interning at this law firm, and it was literally my first experience in an office supporting anyone else. And it was such a wonderful, eye-opening experience of what the hustle and bustle looks like, what your first job, just kind of sitting there. I remember sitting at the desk and supporting the paralegals and the attorneys and thinking, whoa, like this is the real world. I'm not in high school anymore. And so from there, it kind of trickled into different positions over the summer. I actually they called me back to work at that law firm for 3 years in a row. And it was an amazing, incredible, eye-opening experience. So yeah, that was my first experience working as an admin.
Yeah. And you certainly sprung from there. I mean, you really supported some very formidable, but also really accomplished and respected CEOs and leaders throughout your EA career. So it's a pretty awesome trajectory that you have. So as we mentioned, you spent the last couple of decades supporting the needs of your executives and their organizations. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, these various business ventures that you are now a part of, did they start out as passion projects or side hustles while you were still supporting as a full-time EA? And I am also curious to know, what changed in your life or just in your kind of thought process for you to be ready to take the leap in pursuing your own dreams full time?
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. That was my first initial, exposure and experience working. And from there, I went to college. I went to Dominican University. And then I remember after graduating, there was the crash of '08, and it was so hard to find work. It was such a struggle, no matter, how many degrees you had. And so I remember, nannying, and I'll tie this back in, but I remember that nannying was just a job I was able to constantly do and, pay my student loans and pay my way through. And so from nannying, I started taking on more work for the moms and dads, the parents, helping them pay their bills, helping them do other things aside from caring for their children. So that was another experience that kind of steered me in the direction of supporting others. I just realized, like, hey, I can do this. Like, this is possible. I'm able to do this. I'm able to support someone else and make their lives easier. So yeah, that transitioned after college, working for several families, working as an estate manager, supporting them. And just realizing that this is definitely a need. I feel like there will always forever be a need for executive assistants, admins to support others. Um, and yes, to answer your question, so it started off, my personal businesses started off as passion projects. I always knew that as much as I, enjoyed supporting the executives that I was working for, I always had this entrepreneurial spirit within me. I loved working with kids. One of my first companies was when I believe I was almost 25, and I started Gratitude Boys and Girls, which was a weekend workshop program for toddlers. And I would do that on the weekends and then make some extra cash and then work supporting the executives, depending on the company that I was with at the time. And all those skills kind of accumulated over the years. After doing that for a bit, I went back, I got my master's in organization and leadership, because I just feel deep down I'm just that kind of lifelong student. I'm always wanting to learn and improve myself. And yeah, so it's been quite a journey. After doing that, I worked at Zooks, and that was just such a wonderful experience supporting the CEO. He's such a character. I love the guy. He's wonderful, and yeah,
I'm chuckling because I met him. That's kind of we talked about this in the very beginning. I met him when they were still just kind of very bare bones. I mean, they were like in this kind of hangar situation. It was very, very rustic. It was like a warehouse meets office. And these were the early days, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember him saying, "Oh, let's go for a chat." And we sat on these picnic benches outside and talked about, kind of his dream candidate. And then lo and behold, we ended up placing you there, and you were absolutely his dream candidate. So yeah, it's just kind of funny. But yeah, he's definitely a character.
Yeah, no, he's wonderful. And I have to credit a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit and drive. I know that intuitively comes from myself. I've always been this way since I was very little, but I know that with working with such amazing, incredible people such as Tim, that it really has illuminated myself in, what that world looks like in terms of building something that you love. He always talked about, seeing something first and then having it in your hands and having it become something real. And that's something that I've witnessed this last decade in starting different businesses and working for myself. And it's truly wonderful. But yes, the seeing what it's like to work in a startup from a scrappy startup from the beginning and seeing it grow tremendously with teams and, hiring tons of people and growing multiple locations. And I grew as a person for sure during those years supporting him, working for the company, and other companies that came after. But yeah, it was definitely a pivotal time in my life where I saw how much work goes into starting something so difficult. It's so difficult to start any company, but doing it from a place of love and care and inspiration and excitement. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
So as you mentioned, so you were sort of parallel pathing
Mhm.
your EA career and some of these side projects, side hustles, passion projects. So I guess the second part of my question is what shifted for you
Mhm.
to be in a place where you were willing to formally relinquish your EA career and say, you know what, I'm actually going to pursue Violet Ventures full time.
Mhm.
What shifted there?
Yeah, you know what? I have to say I had considered doing it for several years, and it didn't actually hit me till something changed physically, and that was motherhood. It was becoming pregnant, and had gotten married, and we had a beautiful wedding, and then we planned for this baby, and I got pregnant, and I was so excited, and I was in a state in my life thinking like, okay, what does the next stage of my life look like? What do I want it to look like? And I know um, that anything is possible. And it sounds cheesy saying that, you hear that, but it really is true that you build the life you want to live. You really can do that yourself. It's hard work, it's determination and all the other
Mm-hmm.
things, but I think it was just a time in my life, and even before then, to be frank, during COVID, which was before I had my, before I had my baby,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a time of being quiet. I remember being home, and that's when I started my blog publicly, my Venture Love blog and podcast shortly after that while I was pregnant. But I remember sitting in silence, thinking like, okay, this is such a quiet time, and you have nowhere else to go but within. And I started doing a lot of soul searching and reading and writing and journaling, meditating. And it really just got to a point where I said, I really want to do more of what I love. And although I love being a support partner to an exec or CEO, I can do that for myself now. I can be that myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And I think what you share about kind of COVID being this really quiet time and this time of introspection, I think that, people had all very, very different experiences around that. But I think it's really interesting just hearing you say that really kind of hastened and sort of shepherded this new era in your life, which I think is really important. Like we hear that a lot about how, the importance of being introspective, getting quiet, being with yourself and your thoughts, and actually giving yourself the grace and opportunity to really exist in that quietness. And for you, it sounds like it really, kind of engendered this whole new set of opportunities and a whole new direction for your life. So I think, like, what an incredible outcome to emerge from that kind of quiet COVID period.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, it was just a transformative time. I think obviously for everyone. It was such a hard time for everyone. I know
Hmm.
go through such a scary and difficult time, but I wanted to, as soon as we were starting to see sort of the light at the end of the tunnel of COVID, it was just this
Yeah.
whole new world of, okay, like what now? What do we do now?
Mhm.
And it was also a reminder of, gosh, life is so short. Why am I going to do anything but something that I really love? Well, life is so short. And so, um, yeah, I think that was a big lesson that I learned coming out of COVID. And then, getting married and getting pregnant and having my son and thinking, what
Mhm.
kind of mother do I want to be? What kind of
Mhm.
wife do I want to be? What kind of business owner do I want to be? And that's where a lot of my passion projects became more concrete, I guess you could say,
Mhm.
more real. And it's been quite the journey for sure. Yeah.
Do you think that on some level becoming a mother gave you the sense of confidence and empowered you to think about yourself in that way?
I think for sure, motherhood just changes you so much. I mean,
Mhm.
in every way possible, in the hardest ways, in the most beautiful ways. Absolutely. I remember the first couple weeks of finding out I was pregnant, thinking like, "Oh my gosh, like oh my gosh, I'm going to be a mom. Like, oh my gosh, like my life is going to change. Like, will I be able to do this? Or how do I do that? And figuring all those things. But also, I think during pregnancy, I really thought ahead of what do I want this little human being to see in me or to feel from me, like how
Hmm.
do I want to raise this child? How do I want to be present? I know growing up it was difficult. My parents were always working. They spent as much time with us as they could with my sisters and I, but that was something that I knew for myself. I have to be present. I want to be
Hmm.
present. It was just a non-negotiable. And that kind of ties into starting my businesses where I know when you work for yourself, it's very different as opposed to working for someone else, right? And so
Hmm.
having the, I guess you could call it a luxury, but having the luxury, but also the making the decision to start a business and make money doing what you enjoy, helping other people. Um, I feel that if I feel like that's the kind of person I want to show my son. And if I have any other children in the future children,
Hmm.
that it's possible that you can do what you love and still be there for your children. It's not easy, I'll tell you that, but it is possible.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I say that as a mom of two. So
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. But I
Yeah.
think that yeah, I was mentioning this to my team the other day. Maven was recognized recently by the San Francisco Business Times as one of the top 100 women-owned businesses in San Francisco. And there
Incredible.
was a luncheon. Yeah, it was really awesome. But there was a luncheon for the attendees, and so I went to that, and it was really great. Like it was great in the sense that we all had the chance to kind of go around the room and pass the mic and share just a brief snippet of our story. But so many of the women were talking about, you know, how you can, you know, it's not that it's easy, but they were talking about the fact that they feel they've been able to lead really fulfilling lives in both senses of the word. So both professionally as business leaders and owners, but also as mothers. And I mean, a lot of women stood up and said, "I've got two kids and a third on the way," or "I've got one kid and another one." I mean, it was pretty interesting how central their motherhood narrative was to their business narrative, and how integrated they were in kind of saying like I want to say that this is possible, and that it's not that it's easy by any means, but that it's possible if you want this kind of thing. So it was just really nice. It was like a very it's just a very feel good, very supportive kind of gathering. So,
That's awesome. That's
yeah. So curious, as a business owner, what transferable skills from your executive assistant career have you been able to carry over in the launch of your own business? And are there kind of some specific examples that come to mind when you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say a whole bunch, to be honest, because as anyone working as an EA or admin listening, it's it's a role where you are constantly wearing multiple hats depending on the person or the company that you work for and the needs and the stage of the company and all that. But you're wearing so many hats, and gosh, starting a company or a business of any kind requires for you, at least initially, to do the same. You are the marketing person, you are the content creator. At least I was. Everyone is different depending on who you hire or when you hire, but initially, if it's just you at the start, it's me creating the content, it's me sharing the content, it's me writing the copy, it's me doing the editing, it's me promoting, it's me sharing on social media, it's me deciding what social media to be on, it's me creating the blog that I love to write for. And when I was pregnant, it was me starting the podcast that I thought would be so exciting, and it's a way to that I nurture my soul. But yes, the skills that you learn from being an admin and EA, never ending. I have to say, day to day, it's initially it's that first gut instinct reaction that I feel, that I remember feeling so much as an EA, thinking like, he's got to leave at this time to catch this flight, to catch this whatever, right? It's thinking, it's prioritizing is a huge part of it. It's understanding what's really critical in this moment right now to progress and move forward for this, to make that happen. It's all a trickle effect. So it's prioritizing, it's time management, it's a big one, I will say, is having the sensitivity and emotional chip that is so necessary when you're supporting other people, is having the decency to be a human, be a good human. You know, you're working with people in any business you do. You will interact with people, and just being kind and caring and understanding to what they're going through. That's always a big one. So many things. Honestly, calendaring never ends because I'm
Mm-hmm.
scheduling clients left and right. So having
Mm-hmm.
those skills is just so easy now. So many amazing things for sure. But the people aspect is a big one, I think.
Yeah. Do you feel like you work more now as a sole proprietor entrepreneur, or do you feel like you did before?
I will say it's a little mixed because I think in this stage right now, it's a balanced mix where I'm raising my son. I do have support, but I do work. It's just different. You know, it's different when you work for an exec. I mean, I've worked for execs where they wanted 24/7 support, and that's like full on demanding. It's doable, but
Mhm.
it's hard. You know, it's different. And now it's, my employer is a 16-month-old that's teething and wants to eat
Right.
berries for breakfast and not anything else. So it's different. It's a different stage of my life. I will say, the work is different because now instead of working for someone else, I am working for myself. So, the quality of the work is the same. It's just the feeling is different because it is yours versus working for someone else. It's um,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, and I guess you have more autonomy over when you choose to spend that time
Mhm.
versus it just being necessitated, right, by the demands of the business or the executive or the situation or whatever. But you have a little bit more say in how and when you engage with your work.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's such a blessing of being your own business owner, is you are the boss, which is a good or bad thing depending on how organized and how
Mhm.
efficient you are with things. But I truly love it. I've never been happier, and I have to say, obviously, there's this little person in my life that lights me up all day, every day, aside from the tantrums. But it's wonderful, and you're right, it's having the freedom to either pick up the call or call that person later because I'm able to do that versus before where, you do when you're working for someone else, it's different. You have to be on when you're there, but it's different. There's a lot more flexibility, but you have to be able to manage that too. It's not just,
Mhm.
vacation all day, every day. It's different. It's pockets. I find that it's pockets of me with my child and with my family. And then there's pockets where, hey, mom has to work. I've got to get these things done. Otherwise, there's no progress. So it's a good
Yep.
balance.
Yeah, totally. So I asked you the question of what skills have you been able to transfer from your EA career to business ownership? I guess I'm curious the reverse of that question. So what
Mhm.
are some things that didn't necessarily prepare you that coming into being an entrepreneur from an executive assistant seat have been some of the most surprising or challenging or disruptive kinds of things that you didn't anticipate?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, um, I don't know if this answers your question, but the first thing that comes up for me as you were asking was, as an admin and EA, I feel that and I, with many administrative assistants or executive assistants that I've met, we all kind of tend to have very similar demeanors. We're all kind of, not all, but generally speaking, most of the admin friends I've had throughout the years have been a little more reserved, a little more quiet, or not as loud or aggressive, or
Mm.
you know what I mean? And so
I
one of
do.
the,
Yep.
yeah, and so like one of the challenges that I've faced from becoming so public with like my companies is learning to be more outspoken, learning to
Hmm.
advocate, I think is a big thing. Becoming an advocate, advocating for myself, for my business, speaking up for what I want. That's been something that I've always seen reflected back to me from the execs I've worked for. They've all been, for the most part, very well spoken, confident uh,
Hmm.
individuals. And, you know, I love that. I like feed off of that. I love seeing that. And so it's been something I've developed over the years. It's still a challenge because I'm always going to be a little bit more reserved than, um,
Hmm.
you know, someone else that's a high ranking executive or CEO. But yeah, that's been a challenge, I think, that I've learned is difficult. You have to put yourself out there. If you're not
Hmm.
seen, you know, you're not seen. No one will know about you or your business or what you do if you don't put yourself out in the real world and communicate and speak. So that's been something that I've
Yes.
worked
No,
through.
that's a wonderful example. I think that a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, of course, there's always going to be different personalities that enter into this career, and I think some, are more kind of comfortable in the limelight, so to speak, and more public facing or whatever. But
Mhm.
I would agree with you, Violet, having literally met, I don't even know how many thousands and thousands and thousands of EAs over the years. I agree. I think there's a high degree of EAs who seek this role because they're not necessarily wanting to be in that hot seat of being center stage in prime time, that they enjoy leading from behind, right, and kind of having that vantage point. So I could imagine that would be a real shift that you would have to figure out how to navigate successfully. So yeah, I think that's a great example.
Yeah, definitely. I just pictured it kind of like always as an admin, at least for myself personally speaking, I always felt like I was the one managing things behind the stage in the
Hmm.
background. And
Hmm.
my CEO was front and center doing the performance or whatever you want to call it. So
Totally.
that's what the feeling is. And now it's shifted where, oh, I'm in the front now. And what do I say? And what do I do? And
Yeah.
things
You're like, oh, wait, I have the mic. Oh, no.
impact.
Wait
Oh my
a minute. What's going
God.
on? Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. So, as we kind of touched on this, but you've worked for so many successful founders and leaders and operators, and you were just talking about how they had this tremendous kind of sense of confidence and kind of this charisma. Um, I'm curious at the same time, like, are there lessons that you learned over the many years that you supported? Are there certain lessons that you learned by supporting them? And whether it's, lessons of business, lessons of leadership, lessons of, really whatever. And how have you applied those lessons to your role as a business owner and entrepreneur?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Um, sure. I would say one thing I've learned that's been a hard lesson to learn, but it's been so soul nurturing and helpful for myself, is learning when it's time to go. It's learning when it's not the right fit. You know, I think in the beginning as an EA, I would say yes to a lot of things. I was a people pleaser. I wanted to do right by everyone. And sometimes it's not in the best benefit to yourself as a human being. And so I remember certain situations, not too many, but certain situations that will stay with me forever, just knowing that, gosh, this is not the right fit. This doesn't feel good in my soul. Like this isn't the right type of work, or this isn't the right type of individual I want to be working for. And that's, you know, as being an EA. And I think that was definitely a lesson to learn of asking more questions before saying yes, right? Learning more about the role, learning more about the individual, learning more about the requirements, and not just being so eager to please. I think it's something I see in so many EAs. But the way that that's translated into my business is now learning from the beginning is, hey, I'm doing this work that I love. I'm helping women, I'm coaching them, I'm guiding them and showing them, you know, the way, but I also want to be fair and to myself and make sure that I'm taking on clients that feel right and align with me. And not every client is a yes, right? Not every person
Mm,
you take on is a yes, um, and understanding that and really sitting with that and being okay. That was a challenge for me, but it's something that I've really learned is the best thing ever. Is not everyone is going to be a perfect match for you, and that's okay and that's fine. And I think that goes with anything in life.
yeah. Well, and I think I want to circle back on something you said because I think it's really interesting. Like when you think about some of the differences between being an executive assistant versus stepping into your own as a business owner, you said something about, wanting to please and, take care of and something along those lines, right? And I think that that is a very universal trait for the most part that many executive assistants possess, right?
Mhm.
I would ask you, having supported so many founders and leaders, how many of them do you think were fixated or concerned or overly concerned about pleasing people?
That's such a great question. How many of them were, gosh, you know, how do I say this?
You don't have to be polite. It's okay.
You know what I mean? None. And I say that with respect and love for all of them because they've gotten to, I saw for myself when you work as an EA with some of the individuals that I did, where you basically feel like you're married to them because you're there
Hmm.
from morning till night, week to week, month to month, year to year. And you get to know them so well when they're sick, when they're healthy, when they're doing well, when they're having hard days. And yeah, I've realized that no is a complete sentence and it's a perfect answer
Mm,
to anything that is derailing you from where you want to go and how you want to be or who you want to be. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn, but it's been such an important
yeah.
one. So, yeah.
That's a big shift. That right there. Like I think that, talking about things that you've had to navigate, I think that one is a really big one. Like relinquishing that inclination to make everybody happy and please and ameliorate the situation or whatever. And I love what you just said. No is a complete sentence.
Mhm.
I think that should be in your show notes. That's going to be the takeaway from this episode because I think that's a really powerful statement in and of itself.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit, how you have more discretion over your time, that you're still spending a lot of time on the business and on your ventures, but you have more discretion over how you allocate it. Speaking to, maybe the other newer mothers in our audience, do you have any thoughts around, how you've been able to manage the load? And, do you, for instance, have like explicit boundaries or carve outs that you've created for yourself in order to keep some kind of balance or preserve, that for yourself? Just kind of curious if you have anything to offer to our listeners in that respect.
Absolutely. I would say just looking back at my own self, in those first beginning months of motherhood, it's your life is shifted and changed in every way possible, in the hardest ways and the most beautiful ways. And I know personally speaking, um, I had always wanted to do so much more. I'm just that kind of person. I'm a doer. Um, there's so much I want to progress and move forward and achieve. But what I learned is that the saying, there's a reason for every
Hmm.
season. And as much as I wanted to do so many things in the beginning, looking back, those moments in the beginning of motherhood are so, so precious. And man, do they fly. They fly so quickly. So if you're a new mama and you're struggling and frustrated thinking you can't do it all, you're not supposed to do it all. You really should not do it all. You really have to lean in. Um, and thankfully, I have a supportive partner. I know not everyone has that, but leaning into the people in your life that you trust, that you love, that love and care for you, and asking for help, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and understanding that you can't do it all. And that's okay. At some point, it will get easier. Your baby will grow, they'll be a little bit more independent, and then you can start taking on more things. But that was a big lesson for me. I would have saved lots of stressful hours thinking of all the things. Just releasing that pressure is so important, especially in the beginning. And just knowing that your baby will grow, you'll feel better over time, you'll get more sleep, and you'll be able to do more
Mm-hmm.
when the time is right. And you'll know when the time is
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really nice segue for you to maybe elaborate further. We talked about these different ventures that you're doing. You have the consultancy, and you have the motherhood mentorship, and obviously your podcast. But can you maybe elaborate on who are the individuals that you're working with? What are you working with them on? Who's a good candidate for the type of healing and direction and kind of representation that you offer? Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. So it's shifted quite a bit, but I will say it's a true labor of love. I'm working with women that have gone through all the things I've gone through. So I work with women. As a life and health coach, I've studied nutrition. So, a lot of the things that many women are struggling with, they kind of come from the nutritional standpoint of they're not getting enough of the food or enough of the sleep. And it's not just food, right? It's the quality of life. It's really taking a dive, a deeper look into the many areas of your life and examining what areas need more support. So it's working one on one with women and figuring out what it is in their life that they're wanting more support, whether it's support in their career, support in their health or relationships or spirituality. So that's one leg of it. And I actually, on my podcast, the Venture Love podcast, I interview all kinds of women and mamas, and it's changing a little bit more into motherhood. So with the motherhood aspect, it's working with new mamas and helping them, guiding them, exactly like I was just doing a second ago, and showing them that it's okay, and teaching them from the get-go, from pregnancy, from the moment they find out they're pregnant, knowing that they can have support and I can guide them through any of the questions they have when it comes to labor and delivery and what comes after. What does postpartum look like? I know
Mm-hmm.
so many mamas, they prepare for birth. And I was one of them where all you do is prepare for birth, birth, birth. That is the scariest, most overwhelming day. And the truth is, it is a day or a couple days. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
the never ending postpartum period. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think, and I know personally speaking, so much of my support will be going into is helping mamas on that journey, because it's such a difficult one, is navigating what this life looks
Mm-hmm.
like, not just for your baby, but you've shifted and you've changed as a mother yourself. And so what does
Yep.
that look like and where do you need support? So it's different legs of the business that I work in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just to call it out, I mean, the postpartum experience is so, 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 so varied. And I
Hmm.
think that until you really like go below the surface, I think there's a lot of shame and a lot of kind of safeguarding of what people's different experiences around postpartum are. And I think that that's unfortunate, because I think that we set up a lot of new moms to not really understand that it could be very challenging for them. It could also not be very challenging for them, right? But it's the
Hmm.
point that it's wildly different. And I think just knowing that there can be a supportive voice and supportive source of, you know, consolation and advice for that is really powerful, because it's, you know, not I think that we don't often talk about that enough. So it's great that you are making that a more central conversation.
Yes, it's definitely needed, and I'm excited to work with all the soon to be mamas, expecting mamas, and new mamas on this journey, because it's
Hmm.
definitely a road we all could use some support on for sure.
100%. And I think that the layering in the nutritional element is so interesting and wise too, because I really do feel like as a society, we've gotten very, very, very far and distanced from understanding how like how to feed ourselves
Mhm.
in a way that's actually good and healthy. And um I'm I've been kind of on my own journey of healing and transformation around kind of lifestyle changes too. And I think that the more that I get connected to, like, you know, like different ancient cultures who've been harvesting these incredible ingredients for years and doing all these amazing things, and like this knowledge existed, and then I think we kind of got away from it, and now I feel like trying to get back to that is pretty interesting and powerful, and definitely like help support the conversations, because a lot of it is definitely nutrition, you know, nutritionally based.
Exactly, exactly.
You
It's
know.
simplifying a lot of it. Yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of deep diving, simplifying, and getting to the basics. And yeah, you uncover so much when you go deep into life and health coaching. It's definitely soul nourishing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, what advice do you have, or maybe encouragement do you have for some executive assistant listeners out there who might be themselves considering doing something like a side hustle or a passion project, or, you know, maybe even taking the plunge and starting their own business?
Yeah, I would say anything that you truly, truly desire that you can't stop thinking about, or fantasizing about, or being excited about, it's worth investing your time, your energy, your money. I know investing in yourself is so big. It's so important. And I don't think we hear about it enough, but investing in yourself is the only way to grow, the only way to go. You must invest in yourself. Education, whether it's having a mentor, whether it's enrolling in a course or a program, or um, a coaching program, it's really putting yourself in the shoes of the person that you want to become, and knowing that it is possible and you can do it. And just because you've done this work for X amount of years doesn't mean that you can't shift and do something else if it really means so much to you, because it is possible and you can do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And where can people learn or follow you?
Yeah, of course. I'm mainly on Instagram. I have my website too. On Instagram, you can find me at Violet_Ventures. Um, and that's a main way you can connect with me. And I have links in there to my website and podcast and everything else. So that's probably the easiest way. It's Instagram at Violet_Ventures.
Great. And Violet is Violet, in case anyone
Yes.
wants to know for sure. And then I have a final question for you, and that is what we ask of all of our guests, which is, if you could support anyone in the world throughout the course of history or time, who would you choose to support and why?
Such a great question. I'm thinking everyone in the in the past. I would say the face that comes to mind is actually my grandmother. I think of both of them, but I think of one, the grandmother I was named after, and uh, for so many reasons. Just thinking, um, the person I am today is night and day to potentially the person that she was growing up. And just I think it would be such an interesting way to connect and to support and to see what life would have been like and how different it would have been, um, with our interactions. I didn't really grow up with my grandmother, and I heard stories, and I know how hard she worked and what a struggle it was in Nicaragua with her growing up, and just
Mm.
the stage of life and where she was. But yeah, no one famous or anything like that. I would choose my grandma.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Mm-hmm.
I would choose, to see what life would have evolved like if we had more interaction, for sure.
What kind of support do you think she could have used back in the day?
Gosh, I'm just thinking education is a huge one. I know women
Mm-hmm.
get married so young, have so many children, and there's just that huge chunk of self care, and
Mm-hmm.
education is a huge one that I know I would have been able to help her so much. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think of my
Mm-hmm.
grandma.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really have enjoyed our conversation, and I'm really inspired to hear how you're really creating and carving a life for yourself that really aligns to your values and your passions and the kind of existence that you want to provide for yourself and your son. And so I think it's a really lovely story that you've shared with our listeners. So thank you for offering it to us.
Thank you so much for having me. So grateful. Thank you.
Reach is brought to you by Maven Recruiting Group, who specializes in placing executive assistants and support staff to the Bay Area's most prominent executives and companies. If you've enjoyed being part of our podcast community and are interested in becoming part of our candidate community, we're currently hiring for roles in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. You can visit us at www.mavenrec.com to see some of the roles we're currently working on and to submit your resume.